Hi guys, how are we doing today? Okay? Hope you're all doing well. I wanted to talk a bit about freedom today. As I woke up this morning, I was thinking about what it really means to be free, especially in the Western world. Or just in general, I suppose, these days, with globalism being what it is and everything kind of being interconnected. And it just kind of got me thinking about, just how much freedom we genuinely really have. What is freedom? What does it really mean? Is it money? Is it resources? Is it connections? Is it leverage? Is it power? Is it control? Or is it none of those things? We pride ourselves, I think, in the West, being seen as, the beacon of hope for the rest of the world, and the lighthouse of freedom and prosperity and autonomy and the ability to live your life as you see fit. But just how true are those things? Let's face it. We live in societies in which there are endless rules, endless regulations, endless laws that you must comply with, you must conform to. And then there's all the cultural stuff, all the societal, behavioural, expected behavioural sides of things, and the cultural, social, societal norms that you're expected to conform to as well. So I just sometimes wonder what we really mean by freedom. Because if by freedom we mean a conditional state of existence or a transactional state of existence, is that really freedom? Does money really buy you freedom? You might say it buys you more than other people. But is it really freedom? And just how much freedom do you really have? Well, that depends on where you grow up, doesn't it? Depends on your background, depends on your circumstances, depends on the family that you grow up into, depends on how affluent an area you grow up into, depends how much intellect you have and how much talent you have. Depends whether people give you enough opportunities or not. So really, your hand is forced in many respects. Yeah, you can make choices and you can buy things. You can consume as much as you want to. But essentially, the game is rigged. Because without money, let's see how much freedom you have then. And even if you do have money, the less you have of it, the less freedoms you have. If you can even call them freedoms. Now you might say, well, compared to other parts of the world that are much more dictatorial in their governance, let's say, in their more authoritarian regimes, you might say, well, yeah, maybe we have some more leeway in the ways that we live compared to those places. But it's all relative, isn't it? It's all, so maybe we can say that freedom is a relative thing. That there is no real true definition of freedom. You're free to think. You're free to express yourself. But are you really free to change things? Are you really free to bust down the doors of corruption? Does the average person have the ability to really change things? Because, again, we're told that, we have, the ability to vote, the rule of law, etc., etc. But But really, a lot of those mechanisms are just structures in which they give you a kind of superficial freedom, don't they, really? They give you this sense that you're free because you can go and put a little X on a piece of paper every 4 or 5 years. But just how much does that equate to freedom? And even if you do have the ability to vote, okay, what does it really matter? Do you have any say in the policies that are made? Do you have any say in the direction in which the party of your choosing, the government of the time, does things? No. Or the only freedom you have is to go out there and mark a piece of paper to say, I want to vote for this particular party at this particular time, or for this local candidate, whatever. That's about it. That's as far as it goes. So if it is freedom, it's restrictive freedom. It's controlled freedom, which is a paradox and just ironic in and of itself, isn't it? We get told about, how wonderful our democracy is. And it's like, yes, of course, compared to some parts of the world. Yeah, of course, that the way that we live in the West is a better way, maybe in some ways. I'm not suggesting that there aren't places in the world that are more civilized, let's say. But at what cost to your personal freedoms? Just to what extent? What are the real costs for civility? What are the real costs for living in a civilized society where we can afford, quite literally, to be civilized because we all have enough, so that the society doesn't spiral into anarchy? So maybe you could say that might be freedom, that everyone's got just about enough, that they're not at each other's throats, fighting over resources. But then again, you have to say, well, how does that impact other parts of the world? At what cost does your freedom, to what extent does your freedom come from the exploitation of other parts of the world, other people of other parts of the world, their natural resources, their lands, their labour? Which begs the question, is it really freedom then? Are we truly really free? If we cannot live in a civilized manner without the mechanisms of money, without consumerism, without capitalism, then what do we really have in the end? What kind of a world do we live in? It just seems to me that it's very much rigged. The fact that we pride ourselves on being the most sophisticated, advanced, developed parts of the world, and that we are the champions of freedom of speech and civil liberties, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, well, how much of that? Just to what extent are the consequences of that? Not only for the fact that other parts of the world have been exploited for their resources, thanks to imperialism and colonialism. Let's not beat around the bush here. Now, of course, I'm not suggesting that people should sit around, feeling guilty about things that they had nothing to do with. Of course not. But we mustn't forget that. We mustn't forget that in many, certainly with regards to the UK, that was built on its empire, its wealth, its prosperity in many respects. Certainly during the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, were built on the backs of the places in which those empires had their setups in. And we can't, as much as it is uncomfortable to say, but, we can't just overlook the fact that slavery was a part of that exploitation was a part of that, the expansive amount of resource allocation was part of it. So, at the end of the day, it's like, well, is it really, do we live in if you have to go down a path in which you have to be exploitative and carry out immoral, let's say, acts in order for your society, for your country, for your peoples to have a certain degree of let's just call it freedom for argument's sake, whatever that really means, to what extent do you really truly have freedom? Because if your freedom comes at the expense of others, over their freedom, then I don't know, is it real freedom? It's certainly some kind of freedom. It's certainly not moral freedom, is it? But then again, I guess we don't live in a moral world, do we? We live in a world in which the most dominant, the most wealthy, the most influential make pretty much either have direct or indirect influence on the world stage, whether that's with regards to global economy, whether that's with regards to technology, the influence over certain aspects of the national state, let's say, politics to some extent. Actually, well, certainly in many ways, if you're talking about the West, there's a lot of interest now from the East and the Far East. So there's a lot of hands in that want a piece of the pie. There's a lot of hands in the cake. There's a lot of hands out for something. So I guess what I'm saying is that the freedom comes at a cost. Freedom comes quite literally at the cost of other people in many ways. It comes at a cost of other nations' resources that they would quite like to keep, I'm sure. And often it comes down to warfare, resource exploitation, access to resources, which then leverage you and give your country power to such an extent that over time you can have what you call, as we often hear, a civilized society, because your country then has enough. And of course, not even in so-called civilized societies, things aren't ideal, things aren't perfect. And I'm not suggesting here that we will ever reach a truly moral or truly free society. I've realised that we will never reach any kind of a really truly fair or truly just, morally bound, ethically bound world. That will never ever happen. Because we have a finite amount of resources. Most people have a finite amount of money. Most people have a very finite amount of empowerment. And to me, in the end, it really does come down to that latter one. To me, freedom surely is about real empowerment, is about the average person having a true sense of empowerment to the extent where they really can change things. They really can live the ways in which they really want to live. And we know that for the vast majority of people on this planet, that they don't have that they don't have that empowerment. And for most of the time, they don't have it, and they never will have it. And that's deliberate. It's very deliberate. The systems in place, the structures in place, the infrastructure, the way in which money works, the way in which banking works, the way in which societies are run is structured in such a way that it empowers a few and disempowers the many, the masses. Yeah, you can go and buy as much as you want from your local convenience store, your supermarket, shopping mall, whatever. But again, that only depends on how much money you've got. And you don't get to decide the rules, do you? You don't get to decide what your salary should be. You don't get to decide how many hours you can work for the most part unless you're self-employed. But again, you need money to do that. But even then, you still have to abide by lots of red tape and bureaucracy. And when you live in a system that is built around hyper-bureaucratic processes, again, I beg the question, just how free are you? I don't know. You can go to, you could say, well, freedom is having access to education. Freedom is maybe having access to, the ability to train, the ability to get a job, the ability to go to university, whatever. Fine, okay, great. But again, you're still living in a bureaucratic system, and often other people's decisions determine the way that your life progresses or doesn't. And again, it depends on what you have. It depends on how much you have, how much potential you have, how much intelligence you have, how much skill you have, how much knowledge you have. And even with all of those things, okay, you go and get a degree. You go and spend 4 years, 7 years, 8 years doing something. To end up where? Surrounded by materialistic things that don't really truly bring you real happiness, that don't really truly give you a sense of real freedom. In fact, you could argue that a lot of those things actually trap you. In fact, the more you have, the more options, the more choices you have, the more trapped you are. Sometimes less is more, as they say. But again, it really just comes down to, what does it really mean? It's okay, you can go get an education, whether, free or affordable. Okay. So what? Now all you're basically doing there is just ticking a box, ticking a requirement, ticking off certain criteria that you need to fit into the system in which you want to fit into, whether that's a job, whether that's a career. And okay, yeah, that might leverage you in some sense. It gives you more money. It gives you a certain degree of time to travel. But when it really matters, what do we? To what extent where is the value? Where is the meaning in those things? If you live in a society in which you want to really make a change to it, where you want to turn things around, but you're shut down the moment you say anything that's uncomfortable or true or taboo. Again, do you really have freedom when you're censored, when you're shut out, when you're deemed an outcast, an oddball, a nut job, a wacko, because you're saying things or revealing things or trying to reveal things, trying to get data out there? You can think of people like Edward Snowden, for example. And you see what happens. You see what happens when you try to really disturb the fabric of what we call normality. You know, there's that other guy, isn't there, that's I think recently been extradited to the US. I forget his name off the top of my head now. You know, he was locked up in an embassy for what was it, well over a decade, I think it was. You know, again, for trying to say things that disturbed the systems and structures of power. And that's kind of my point of this whole thing is, you know, when it really comes to you having the ability to truly change things around or try to expose things or try to make things better for the average person, then you suddenly find out just how much freedom you have. Because essentially, all of the other things are just baubles and tinsel on the Christmas tree. They're just trimmings, you know. They're just snacks. Yeah, sure, you can have whatever you want, but don't think for 1 second that you're going to change this or that or the other. Because we will put you in place. You will know your place, and you will conform. Because I believe that if you live in a society in which you step out of line, where you don't play the game of conformity anymore, then you know, and hence all the rules and laws, etc., punishments, consequences, fines, then you suddenly see that you're not free. Don't pay your council tax and see what happens. You know, drive off without paying for your petrol, see what happens. Oh, sorry, your electric these days. You know, don't pay your energy bills and see what happens. Don't pay the lender what you owe them. Don't pay back the bank you owe more money to, and let's see what happens. Now, of course, you know, of course we should all have accountability and responsibility and keep our word, because that's important too, because without trust, because essentially that's what the social contract is built upon, isn't it? It's built upon trust and respect for the rule of law, for the framework in which we've all been told that we have to conform to. We must comply with it because it's in our benefit. But is it though? There are certainly benefits from it. But you know, does it really help us? Okay, yeah, you can say, well, you know, it stops people from becoming, you know, wild animals and looting and, you know, and society turning into some kind of hellhole very quickly. Fine, but having said that, that's essentially what humanity's always been anyway. It's always been about people trying to, you know, humanity is self-preservation at all costs. It's about getting what you deem to be your fair share of something, whether that means exploiting others or not. So it's not so much just about freedom, it's about morality. You know, where do the two connect? You know, is there a relationship between the two things or not? And to what extent? Okay, you can have, you know, endless amounts of money in your economy. You can have, you know, new infrastructure, you know, industrialization. You can have, you know, certain benefits that society allows you to have if you comply with this and this. But again, at what cost? You know? Just how much do you have to give up, ironically, to be free? If you like, again, I keep saying this word, but I don't really know what it means, to be honest. I really don't know what it really means from a philosophical standpoint. I really genuinely don't know what that word means anymore. You know, maybe it's an awakening I'm going through, or maybe it's just a philosophical phase. You know, maybe I'm talking a load of shit here. I don't know, but maybe I am. But I don't think I am. I think you probably agree with me to some extent. You know, let's face it. You know, a lot of the progression of the West, certainly over the last, let's say a century or so, came at the cost of people dying, came at the cost of people essentially dying young, being worked to death, having very little in the way of rights. But now that we have more rights than we used to, there's more restrictions as well. There's more control over our lives. There's much more control now than there's ever been. Far more bureaucratic than it's ever been. So where do you draw the line? Where do you say that, just how much should you give up? How much do you have to sacrifice in the end? And if you do, can you genuinely say that I'm a free person in this world? Am I really truly free in my community, in my country, and globally? And I think the answer to that is no. You're not free. You can't just go and do whatever you want. You can't just go wherever you want. You can't just even sometimes say whatever you want without there being consequences. Now, yeah, to some extent, there has to be a certain degree of control, because otherwise it would be chaos, like I've said already. But so I'm not saying that we should. I'm not saying that there aren't some advantages to our lives to having a certain degree of deterrence, let's say. But I don't really think you can really truly sit there and say you're free. You could compare yourself to North Korea and say, well, yeah, but compared to that life, I'm free. But it's not really, though, is it? It's a different kind of. It's not even so much freedom. And remember, freedom is the wrong way to look at it in that way. It's more of a case of. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's about freedom. It's more about like morality, isn't it? It's more about. I guess my point, is really that the more of a society, the more a society prides itself on being morally bound, the less free in certain ways it's likely to be. You're essentially giving up freedom for morality. Or you're giving up morality for freedom, depending on how you look at it. And even then, when we do say that, when we reach a point where we say, okay, well, it's better than being in Afghanistan or some other Middle Eastern country that's still stuck in the Stone Ages or whatever. It's like, yeah, it's better. I agree. I don't think anybody would deny that. Of course, nobody wants to live in some hellhole of a country that's hasn't got clean water or certain rights for people, but my point is that I think it's all relative. If it's more of an illusion than it is an actual thing, then what does it really matter if you can buy as many bottles of soda as you want? It's like, yeah, you have the ability to consume more and access more, and you have more rights in certain ways, let's say, than compared to other places. But other places also have more, let's say, freedoms than you do. There are things in other parts of the world that you could say there's more leeway in their way of living than the way that you have. I could talk about Thailand. There are certain things you can do more over here than you can do back in the West. But that's because there's less bureaucracy. There's certain bureaucracy here. There's no doubt about that. But there's less of it. So that means that you can do more things, but also at the same time there's more consequences. There's more. So you see, I guess what I'm saying is that it's a tangled web of things. It's like you can't. It's very difficult, I think, to truly define what freedom really is. Because if people have to die for it, if other people have to suffer for you so that you can have a certain degree of comfort, or you have to give up certain things for you to have a certain degree of comfortable lifestyle, it's not really freedom, is it? It's a contract. That's all it is. It's a contract. It's an agreed, or rather, it's not really necessarily agreed upon, is it? It's just that there are deterrents in place that essentially make sure that you agree to take part in the game of the social contract. That you play your part in conforming to it. Because if you don't, then you'll soon find out that the things that you say that you call freedom will no longer be a part of your life anymore, or they'll be severely restricted. So essentially, if you call it freedom, or whatever you want to call it, is bound by you conforming. And as I've said, the moment you start to challenge the status quo, challenge the way that systems work, challenge conformity, compliance, you soon see just how quickly your freedoms can be, if you want to call them freedoms, you can be taken away from you. I don't really necessarily call them freedoms. I call them temporary privileges, because that's what they are. You break the law to such an extent, you either get fined or you get sent to jail. And if you do something, even if you accidentally kill somebody or something, that's it. You're going to be in jail for 10, 20 years, even if you didn't mean it. Now, I'm not saying that there should be no punishments. There should certainly be some degree of consequence for people's actions, because that's. But again, it's. I guess where do you draw the lines here? This is the problem, isn't it? It's like, what to what extent is conformity actually really? To what extent does conformity equate to freedom? To me, sometimes I just kind of see it all as a bit of a pretense. It's a bit kind of it's a very fragile, flimsy. It's only convenient for you to have a certain degree of let's say financial, not necessarily freedom, but a certain degree of financial autonomy, let's say, because it helps keep the economy afloat. It boosts the economy, doesn't it? Economically speaking, it's better for people to have some money in their pockets. It's better for people to have some degree of rights, not because you want necessarily people to have freedoms, but because it creates a society or creates a structure in which people are more likely to conform. The less people have, the less likely that they're going to conform, because they've got nothing to lose, or they've got less to lose. So the more you have, the more you've got to lose. So again, are you really free? Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just saying. People live these very kind of delusional states of mind in which they say, I bought this and I bought that and I bought this. It's like, well, okay, now you've got no money now. So how much freedom have you got now? Well, I haven't really got any money left. Well, okay, so have you got any freedom then? Have you got any real freedoms? Well, no, not really, because I haven't really got any money. I can't go anywhere. I can't go on that holiday. Can't go and buy that other thing I wanted because I've got no money left. So it's in a sense really you're buying. You literally have to buy yourself a certain degree of leeway in society. It's a contract. It's not freedom. It's a contract. It's not freedom. It's a transaction. It's not freedom. It's conditionality. All right, that is the bottom line of it. If you suddenly expose your local council's corruption, or you start speaking out about some dodgy, shady going on in some department of the government, you're gonna potentially have your life ruined. There's countless people on YouTube that talk about this kind of stuff. And on that point on the internet, and just how much freedom do you really have on the internet now? it's becoming more and more punitive as time's going on. People getting banned, people having their accounts hit with strikes, certain comments, certain words being banned, certain, even flags being banned now. Just more and more restrictions and control and less autonomy, even if it's not even anything to do with hate speech or anything like that. Because the internet's becoming a place of, the internet is run by itself. It's not run by the people that use it. It's run just as society. It's not run by the people that use it. It's not run by the masses, that's for sure. It's run by lawmakers, policymakers, authorities, law enforcement, judges, lawyers, politicians, governments, government departments, government bodies, government-based organisations, world, bodies, major institutions, global institutions. Do you have any freedom in what they're doing, what they're saying? Do you have any control? Do you have any input in do you really have much input in what's going on in your local area? Probably not. You can go and write a letter, you can, send an email, okay, big fucking deal, so what? Do you really think it's going to make much of a difference? It's like, how many times do people write to their local council about some complaint or something going on, and they never hear anything back, or their local police station or their local MP or whatever, and they never hear anything, or the government itself. So don't come at me with all this bullshit of real freedom and I'm really truly I'm living a life that's truly my own. How you fuck? You're not. You're not living your own life at all. You've been so conditioned, so engineered through advertising, marketing, your culture, the way that you were brought up, the people that you spent time around, that you've no idea just how much true freedom you really have or you don't have. You've no idea. People think that they're making their own choices all the time, but are you really? How much of your choices is down to things that are going on a subconscious level? That's why you buy the things that you do. There are reasons why you like that particular chair, why you buy that particular phone, why you want that particular car, why you want that particular woman, why you like that particular type of pornography, why you want to go on that particular holiday to wherever you want to go. It's not all just random shit. It's all subconscious. That's all embedded in your subconscious mind through years and years of experiences and things, whether it's various insecurities, traumas. It's a whole package of different things. It's a whole package of different things that come together. That essentially, your subconscious mind is controlling far, far more things, or at least influencing anyway, than you truly realise. There's a reason why my video is facing that way, because it's the best possible angle and way for me to do it. I don't want to be on camera in every single video. There's a reason why I bought that particular plant. There's a reason why I bought that particular mat. Because subconsciously, it reveals something, or there's a certain degree of comfort in it that reminds me of something else. So you're not really free at all. You're controlled. You're controlled by your subconscious mind, and because of that, you're easily manipulated and you're easily led. And so the masses, as I'd hate to be cliche here, but most people are just like a pack of, they're just a herd. It's the herd mentality. It's the groupthink mentality. Most people believe the things that they think, that they're told to kind of believe in. How many Americans have that whole thing of we are the greatest country in the world, we are the best of the world? It's really, are you? It's I don't doubt that you've got some really great parts of your culture, in terms of certainly when it comes to gastronomy, I accept that. But as far as like the arrogance of saying that, the boldness of the audacity to sit there and say that your country that's only a couple of centuries old is somehow the absolute peak of all civilizations ever is a bit of a stretch. I certainly wouldn't say that about my country. But having said that, I kind of respect the fucking balls to say it. At least having the balls to have a certain degree of confidence in yourself. But anyway, that's a different matter. But I just think at the end of the day, look, a lot of things that we were told that we are or we have, I think when you really peel it back, when you really sit back and think it through properly, you realise actually that a lot of it's just, it really is, and I hate to keep saying this again and again and again, but it really just is smoke and mirrors. It's really not what you think it is. You are controlled far more than you realise. Far, far more than you truly realise. Now again, compared to other parts of the world, you might say, well, yeah, but, okay, it's not true freedom, but it's better than other parts of the world. Fine, okay, fair enough. I can get behind that. But because I can get behind people who at least have the courage to admit uncomfortable truths, who can face reality as it really is, rather than living in this little bubble of delusion, this bubble of denial, and this state that this kind of like false sense of like security and stability and safety that you think you have, because so many things are riding on the things that you call freedom are riding on so many different things, and if one or more of those things collapses, then you'll see just how much freedom you really have. You don't really truly have any freedom. You think you do, but not really. Not in any real meaningful way. But again, this is just my view on it. This is just my personal take on it. Maybe you think something very different to me, and that's fine. That's okay. We all have differences of opinion. We're not all going to agree on everything. And you could say, well, that's freedom. It's freedom for everyone to have their own opinions. Okay, fine, great. If that's what you think it is, then yeah. You're free to express yourself. But when it comes to expressing yourself in ways that really matter, that really make a difference in the world, it's not going to talking with your friends in private. But in a public space, in a space, in a context in which saying uncomfortable true things really matters, then that's a different ballgame, isn't it? If we really had true freedom, then everybody would have a comfortable life. Everybody would have enough money to have a comfortable life. And we don't have that, even in the West. We don't have that. We have a small minority of people who hold on to their wealth, and a growing divide between those who have a hell of a lot of money and those who have very little or virtually nothing. So when it comes to financial matters, we don't really have true freedom at all. Because you might say that freedom is equality, that everybody has the same things, and we know that that's not true. Some people have better houses than others. Some people have more houses than other people. Some people have more cars. Some people have a shit ton of money in the bank, and some people don't have anything. Now you could say, well, that comes down to personal accountability and personal choices and lifestyle. Yeah, that is true to a point, but not exactly, because at the end of the day, if you don't grow up in wealth, if you don't grow up in affluence, if you don't grow up surrounded or being connected to a family that's got money, you're going to struggle. It's going to be a real, genuine struggle for you to get yourself to climb out of it. And most people don't. Most people can, because they don't have the resources to do it. They don't have the money to do it, ironically enough. They haven't got the access to things that they would need to get out of it. So there isn't any real true fairness or freedom or equality or morality to any part of the world. Certainly not the West. Even if you have more rights, there's still massive inequalities, massive unfairness, massive injustices. You know, that we live in 2025, and yet, you know, so many people today in Britain and probably across much of the West are now struggling to get by because of inflation, because of choices that had nothing to do with them, because of decisions that other people made on their behalf. So again, are you really free? Did you choose that lifestyle? Is that your fault, is it? Is it your fault now that you're paying 3 times more than you did 20 years ago for oil, for gas, for electric, for food? No, it's got nothing to do with us. But yet we're expected to bear the brunt of it. How is that freedom? How is that right? How is it right that other people in much better positions in life get to make all the rules for you, get to make all the choices, including filling your countries up with people that have no right to be there? So why have they got more freedom than you do? Why can't I just go to any country, and not that I would anyway, but why can't I just go, if we're going to have equality, let's have it then. Why can't I just go to any country I rock up to, anywhere in the world, and just say, here I am, give me access to money, benefits, healthcare, etc., etc. I'm sorry we can't. Oh, well, why not? Your citizens have come to my country. Why can't I do it here? That would be freedom, wouldn't it? See, it's all hypocrisy. It's all double standards. It's all a facade. Every bit of it. It's all a facade. And that's why people don't want to talk about it. That's why people don't want to have these conversations, because they know deep down that you're right. It's too uncomfortable for them. It's too difficult for people to really live in the real world. It's too difficult for people to have to burst through their tiny little bubble of self-fulfillment and pretentiousness and layers of delusion that they've built up across years or decades. Now you can call me an idealist if you want. Okay, fine. I don't see myself as an idealist. I see myself as just someone that just likes to be honest and just say things as high as I personally see them to be. Now, again, it's like, I'm not saying that everyone has to agree with me. At least we could say that. We could make that argument that if there is any kind of freedom in the world, we can at least, compared to some places anyway, we certainly have more of a ability, more leeway to at least have some opportunities in certain contexts, let's say, to talk about more things than we do in other parts of the world. Okay, granted, fair enough. That would be a fair point to me. You can have your own opinions. You can disagree with me. You can agree with me if you want. You can call me out. You can call me out. You can ridicule me. You can rubbish my arguments. You can rubbish my opinions. Fine, okay. But that only really matters when it's between equals, when it's between people of a kind of similar level. When it comes to power structures, power dynamics, really genuine structures, systems, people in real positions of authority in this world, it's a different matter then, isn't it? So again, does it really matter? What does it matter if you can agree or disagree? If it doesn't really make any difference, what does it matter if you can go and vote? What does it matter if you can go and buy 50 fucking t-shirts, 20 pairs of jeans, eat yourself into a fucking early grave because of diabetes or heart disease or whatever? Okay, great. Freedom to do what? Freedom to die prematurely? Freedom to trap yourself into debt? Freedom to keep convincing yourself that you actually are free? Writes itself, doesn't it? I mean, it's you couldn't write it. Because, we know that real freedom doesn't exist because we have double standards in this world. How many of our governments are doing shady, dubious shit, getting away with all sorts of stuff? How many politicians get caught in scandals and never go to jail, never even face a fine? And yet if you do the same things that they did, you'd be in jail for 10, 20 years. As I keep saying, are you really free? Because if you were, you'd be able to do the things that they would do and get away with it as well. But we know that's just not the way that it works, isn't it? We have a select small number of people with a lot of access to money, access to resources, access to trade, access to the global economy, access to other people like them around the world, who get to sit together, who get to meet, who get to influence and change and push things forward in their minds for the benefit of everybody else, right? Where's your say in those things? Do you ever get invited to the G7 or what it's called? Is it the G7 summit? I think it is G8, what it's called. Do you ever get invited to these major, health, summits or whatever, the WHO or meetings involving the United Nations or whatever it is? Major, think tanks and corporations and major bodies around the world. Do you have any input in the prices of, commodities? The markets? No. So where is your freedom then? Because what the freedom is the ability to give is that we allow other people to do things on our behalf. That's not freedom, is it? That's not real freedom. We can say, well, how would it work then? How can you put? It should be a more democratic process of things. We don't have that, do we? We don't have that. We have major bodies making decisions about just about everything you can think of for the pretty much the rest of humanity, or at least trying to anyway. And as well as just corruption is rife. Anywhere you go in society, from the lowest levels to the top levels, to the echelons of society, the world, corruption is everywhere. The only difference is that for the most part, those on the lower ends don't get away with it, and those on the top ends do, most of the time. Or at least don't face the same strictness of the consequences when they get caught for it. Yeah, they'll get moved out of their positions, or they'll go off and do something else, and walk off into the moonlight, or whatever. And you'll never hear from them again. You'll never see them in prison. You'll never see George Bush in prison. You'll never see Tony Blair in prison, because they're protected. They are, as much as I hate to say it, a protected class. It's one big boys' club, and you're not involved in it. You're not part of it. It's just, all you have to do is watch some of George Carlin's. I think that's his name, the comedian, the US comedian. I think he died in 2007, I think. You have to watch some of his stand-up stuff, and he's absolutely spot on. He had it all figured out, and so did Bill Hicks. They had it absolutely spot on. They had it figured out. They knew what was really going on. And you could say, well, yeah, but they had the freedom to. Yeah, of course they had the freedom to do stand-up. Because it wasn't going to make any difference. Yeah, you can go and ridicule and mock, humiliate people, make money out of it. Sure, okay, fine. But you're not going to change anything. It's not going to make any real difference. You're not going to really, truly change anything in the end. See, this is the illusion, you see. This is the thing, is that we're told that we're free because we can do this, 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 and this. But you can't change anything, though, can you? Not really. And that's why they want you to have that certain degree of freedom. They allow it so that you think you're free, so that you think you have a life that's your own. And to some extent, partly, yes, it is your own, to a certain level. But the moment you step out of line, the moment you get too close to the truth, you get too close to trying to change something or revealing something, that's it. That's your life ruined. And if you don't end up in massive debt, you end up in jail. And if you don't end up in jail, you end up dead. History proves that. Time and time again, people who've spoken up, who've challenged the system, the structures of their time, either ended up in prison or were killed for it. Think of John F. Kennedy, for example. So I believe that we are in a conditional state of freedom, if you like. We belong to a world in which, certainly in the Western world, where we perform freedom. It's a performative freedom. It's a conditionally based freedom. It's a controlled, limited freedom. It's a restricted, rigid form of freedom. It's you're free because we tell you are. You're free because we allow you to be free. Well, free in inverted commas. Just how much of your political system is being controlled or influenced by lobby groups. How much of its stakeholders have a say, more of a say than you do, have more power, more influence than you do, and you will ever do. Do you truly get to decide where you go to school, or your parents? Not really, because it depends on whether they accept your application, whether they like your application or not. Same when you go to college, same when you go to university. Now you could say, yeah, but at least you have the option. So, yeah, but the real control is out of your hands. Just as when you go for a job interview, you don't have any real freedom over it. You don't have any real control over it. You don't have any real say or power. Even if you get the job, you're bound by a contract and the small print of it. And I can guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, they're more empowered than you are. That's how society is. That's how society works. Where the top dog, or the one that thinks it's the top dog, has more say, has more power, more control, more influence, more wealth, more rights than you will ever have. More legal means than you have. And that's not by accident. That's deliberate. That is by design. And okay, fine. You can go and buy a cheap pair of shoes, a cheap shirt, a cheap pair of shorts, a cheap coat, a cheap jacket, a cheap hat. Or as many pairs as whatever you want. But at whose expense? And what are the consequences for that? What are the consequences for your so-called precious, fragile freedom that you have? Well, I can tell you, it's exploitative factories across parts of Asia, parts of South America, even parts of Europe, Eastern Europe. Who get paid fuck all for what they do, work in dangerous conditions, sweatshops, that's what they call them, because that's exactly what they are. So your freedom, your precious freedom, is bound together by other people that have much less than you. So even if you call it freedom, is it a moral freedom? Is it a just freedom? Do you really deserve it? Is it right? Is it an ethical freedom? Only you can decide, you know. I don't know all the answers here. I'm just throwing my thoughts out there. I'm just saying this is, you know, look, this is what I think. And yet we see much of this performative moral outrage. There's so much of this virtue signaling bollocks that you see so much of now, and have seen for the past decade, close to a decade. But these people don't care about the third world. They don't care about people struggling. They don't care about the developing world. People starving to death, where there's hardly any real access to clean water, where they're just struggling to survive. But you know what? You could at least say that those people in some ways maybe have, perhaps in some ways, more freedoms than we do. They live a more natural world, definitely harder, but a more natural life. Maybe a healthier life. Maybe in some ways even a better life. But it's a struggle. So when you compare it to them, you can say, well, it's not necessarily free, but it's better than that. Better than getting up every day and having to find water and kill for your breakfast that day. Okay. But also, you're living a life that's built on other people's backs. You get to have the way that you get to live the life you think is free because of other people that have less than you. It's built on other. So really, you don't really necessarily even deserve it. They deserve that freedom more than you do. And yet they have less than you. So where's the fairness in it? Where's the moral? We hear about all, this moral posturing by the left, and this need for reparations, and that somehow just all of this performative moral outrage that you see all the time, and yet these same people, they don't bother going up. They never go to these places that they talk about, that they protest about, that they're so upset about, so angry about. Why? Because they're too comfortable. It's not freedom; it's comfort. They don't want to really help those people. They just want to be seen as ethically and morally righteous people. Want to claim some moral high ground, some ethical high ground, let's say. I definitely don't think that we live in a utilitarian world, in my opinion, not anymore, if we ever really did. But again, a lot of people might disagree with me on that, but that's the way I look at it. It's the greatest good for a very small minority of people, and even if we do live in some kind of a shallow utilitarian state or system, it's because of other people. It's because of other people's efforts, other people's resources, other people's lands, that you have it. But surely that contradicts what it's supposed to be, because if it doesn't actually impact and help the people, those people themselves, then is it really utilitarian? And if it means that you have to, if you have to have some kind of twisted form of utilitarianism in order to have some kind of libertarianist, kind of individualistic kind of society or life or lifestyle, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know. I'm stuck, really. I get stuck when it comes to these kind of things. You know, where's the real freedom in this? Where's the real justice? Where's the real, where's the fairness in all of this stuff? Where's the morality? We hear a lot about people being, we live ethically in the West. We try and live, in a way that's better for our environment, for your environment, for your immediate environment. But that's about as far. Most people's worlds extend about as far as the end of their noses, for the most part. Most people don't give a fuck about Africa or some economic disasters in South America, or the war going on between Ukraine and Russia. Most people don't give a fuck. That's because most people now are struggling to get by. And I think, even if we did have freedoms, or let's say more leeway in the way that we live our lives than compared to other parts of the world, it's definitely degrading. It's definitely getting worse. And in fact, you could say that in some ways that actually the tables are turning. That other parts of the world now are far more developed, richer, affluent than the West is these days. Is that fairness? Is that moral? Maybe it is. Maybe that's what you get from being, maybe that's the natural outcome of a failed empire, a failed colonialist state. I don't know. You could say that the West has more protected rights, let's say, human rights compared to other places. But again, at what cost? What do you have to give up so that you can have those things? What do you have to give in order to get something? Even if you say that, okay, well, the freedoms come in mostly in terms of like access to more rights than other parts of the world, okay. But yet at the same time, ironically, and it's a bit fucking hypocritical, but for Western leaders to talk about, to try and boast that we are a nation of, moral duties and giving that people rights and privileges and certain freedoms compared to other parts of the world that don't seem to have them or lack them in any real meaningful way. Okay, but then at the same time, those countries are engaged in wars, exploitation of resources, and dodgy military stuff going on in other parts of the world in which innocent people, civilians, are dying all the time. So you can sit there and be arrogant and boast about how much freedom and autonomy and independence that your citizens have, and yet at the same time you like to talk. You like to kind of deliberately gloss over the fact that you're committing atrocities abroad, including to some extent some degree of genocide, whether direct or indirectly. And also at the same time, how much of your tax money is paying into that system, is paying into military budgets. So even if you do have rights and certain freedoms, how much of your money that you're paying every week or every month is going into budgets every month or whatever, however it works. I don't know all the ins and outs of governance, but I assume that taxation gets spent, percent of it, certain percentages of it goes on military budgets and whatever. Probably some of it towards weaponry, tanks, guns, jets, etc. You're indirectly kind of potentially, or in theory anyway, probably helping to profit, the military that's committing acts of terrorism, probably abroad in some way or other, certainly exploiting other parts of the world for their resources, or at least trying to. So, okay, you've got rights, but at what cost? Because you have to pay into the system, you have to pay into the tax system. That's the condition. We will give you these access to certain rights, but you have to pay into the tax system, in which you have no control over where that money gets spent. You don't know where that money's going to. It just goes automatically from your bank account, or from the employer's bank account every month to the HMRC. You don't know where it's going. You don't know how it's being spent. Where's the freedom in that? Do you have any say in that? I don't think you do. As far as I know. See, this is not a simple thing, is it? It's not as simple as saying I'm free and you're not. It's not as simple as that. It's not as simple as saying I'm free because of this or this. It's like, no, it's complicated. And I think you really have to then sit down and say, well, what's your definition of freedom? What do you really mean? And what are the consequences of your freedom if you do have it? And is it moral freedom if it has consequences for other people? Whether that's directly or indirectly, is it? I don't know, but clearly there's going to be some kind of an impact for you. There's clearly some kind of a impact for you to have for you to have a certain degree of comfort and a lifestyle that you want. There are impacts of that. There are consequences of that. If you want to eat meat, you've got to kill an animal. If you want to grow potatoes or carrots or whatever, then you've got to have the money for the seeds. You've got to have the money for the agricultural equipment. You've got to make sure that you technically polluting the environment to do it. You're killing things in the process because you've got to keep certain pests off your crop. So again, just how fair and moral and right is the ways in which we live. Just generally as a species, it's like, I sometimes think that we had much more freedom in many ways when we were just tribes. I think we lived probably much more morally bound and ethically bound ways of life back then than we do today. The only difference now is that we've got much more comfort and much more choice than those early hominids had, those early human tribes had. That's the only real difference. And you've got technology, far superior technology to anything they ever had. That's it. We live lives that are not really natural and haven't been for a very long time. Civilizations are technically natural, but it's I guess you could say it's the inevitable, let's say, outcome of technology, isn't it? It's an inevitable outcome in which, if you want to have, the clues in the name, civilization, civilized system of interplay between people, then there has to be some kind of structure to it, I guess. But at what cost? At what cost to your personal freedoms, to your natural human being? To what cost? What do you lose in the process of all of these things? What do you have to give up? See, it's to me, it's not freedom. It's this delusional idealism. It's this overriding sense of hypocrisy that bothers me. It's the power dynamics, the unfairness of it all, and all the lies and deceit that we tell ourselves, that we believe in. And then at the end of the day, you can only really have, as much as you might like to think that your society is morally bound. Well, Yeah, but like that really depends on how much you can only really have a civilization if you've got enough resources to build it, and a lot of those resources aren't going to be within reach. So you're going to have to rely on other parts of the world, their resources that they want, as I've said already in this video, to build something that you want. But they might need those resources. They might want them. So the only real freedom, the only real true freedom is in the ability to get to access to things first, so that you can have something that you want. But at the same time, it's certainly not moral, because you have to rely on other people for something that you want, and there are consequences for that. Damage to the environment, damages to ecosystems, precious finite resources that might be harder to find, that other countries might rely on but now can't get access to anymore because they've been bought up. And if you try and get access to them, you'll end up in war. So freedom is, if and I say that word very, very loosely, is built on, I think, unethical practices, immorality. It's built on the backs of other people, those less fortunate than you. That's not freedom. That's just exploitation. That's just comfort. That's just you being apathetic and living in denial and enjoying the benefits, enjoying the comfort that other people allowed you to have. And as far as freedom of speech is concerned, yeah, you can say as much as you want up to a certain point, but then you suddenly find that you're getting shut down because it's deemed to be inappropriate, or you say something out there in the public. You get on a soapbox or something, and you start spouting some things about what's going on in your local community that are true, and the police come about, or somebody hears it and someone reports you to the police, and you suddenly get arrested for a breach of the peace, even though you're not actually technically breaking the law. You're just saying things that are true. Where's the freedom? All I'm saying is, when it really truly matters, I don't think freedom really exists. I think there's a superficial level of it. There's a surface level. There's consumerism freedom. There's a certain degree of freedom in society to a point. But again, to me, it's a very loose form of freedom. It's a conditional form of freedom. It's transactional a lot of the time. But at the end of the day, it's like you're up against people who have their own definitions of freedom. So even in the same society, people have their own ideals. They have their own, even in the same family, even in the same friendship groups, people have their own versions of what they call reality, that what they deem to be right, what they deem to be moral, ethical, just, right, wrong, what they deem to be freedom. And a lot of the time you'll find that you disagree with them on some things. It's like, well, I don't really think that that's freedom. Well, I do. Well, I don't. Well, I do. So I guess what I'm saying really is that, in theory, yes, freedom sort of exists, but not really, because without status, without a certain degree of money, without credentials, without knowing the right people, your freedom means nothing. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter how much. It doesn't even matter how much money you have. Because if you are censored, put in a straitjacket in one form or another, That's not freedom, is it? It's not if it's not freedom of speech. And you can, how many choices do you really need? How much, even if we say that freedom's a genuine thing, how much freedom is right for you? How much freedom is good for the world? How much freedom do you want? How far can capitalism go? How far can consumerism go before we run out of resources? How much mass-produced shit every day ends up in a landfill within a few weeks, a few months? Freedom to do what? to rape the planet of its resources, to destroy the environment, to make life unbearable for other parts of the world, to export our pollution to other parts of the world so that we can say that we're doing our bit for the planet. Is that freedom, is it? See, rights, you see, rights are a very fluid thing, I think, just to kind of move it on here. But, I think they're very fluid, they're very conditional, and your access to your ability to have rights depends on a lot of things. And often, like, you think about if you get, you get caught for speeding or something like that, police pull you over, they either give you a ticket or they let you move on, or I don't know, whatever it might be, like, yeah. I don't know, like you fail to pay your council tax on time or something, and they send a letter through to you, warning you or something, or how many times like authorities break their own rules? How much hypocrisy is going on out there? How many times do authorities and councils react with overreach? With punitive measures, with pettiness, and get away with it? How many times are they not following the rules? How much? Why should they have more freedom than you do? Why should they have more freedom of rights of getting away with things than you do? Even if you haven't technically really done anything seriously wrong. It's a system of control. Freedom is an ability to give people the illusion that they are in control, so that they conform. The more that people think they're free, the more likely they are to conform. The more control that you have over people. Yeah, the West has technology, it has infrastructure, it has certain benefits and advantages of many other parts of the world. But at the same time, it's much more restricted in many ways, because all of those things are bound by bureaucratic processes in which you have to dot the I's and cross the T's. And if you don't, then you lose out on certain things, and you suddenly find yourself with lesser freedoms. It's not about freedom. It's about conditionality. It's about conformity. It's about compliance through bureaucratic processes that either allow you or don't allow you to have freedom. So freedom is a very flexible thing. Rights are very flexible things, and often you don't have any real freedom or rights to change those things, to have any real say over those things. That's just a cold hard fact. Do you get to make the laws? Do you get to sit down with key policymakers on major policies that are going to impact you and your family and the future generations of your family's lives? No. Do you have any real say in the direction in which your community is going to go, or your city, your town, your village, your capital cities? Do you have any real say over things? Do you have any real ability to truly have any real meaningful value, really valuable input that could steer things in a different direction than the way that they are? Very little. And even if you do have the ability to voice your concerns at some, local consultations or through the ballot box, whatever, okay, big fucking deal. Like, so what? They don't give a fuck about your input. They don't give a shit about what you've got to say. They're going to do whatever they want to do. Whatever's profitable, whatever they can make a business out of. That's, your rights are only there to protect the state, to protect the bureaucratic state in such a way that you keep conforming, you keep propping the economy up, you keep propping the system up. And once you start to threaten that, you lose your rights, you lose your freedoms. Or what your soul, or what they sell to you as your rights and freedoms. They're really more just kind of symbolic matters, I think. They're not really true absolute things. I don't really think there's a real genuine absolutist kind of form of freedom in any existence in the world. And if you think that it does exist in an absolute form in the West, then you're living in denial. To me, real freedom is the ability to say whatever you want, do whatever you want, make meaningful, valuable changes to things that make a difference, not just to yourself but to other people. And unless you've got money, unless you know the right contacts, unless you've got a certain degree of respect or dominance or some kind of leverage over other people in some form or another, however that is, you're nobody, you're nothing, you don't exist. You only exist as a taxpayer, you only exist as a number on a national insurance card. You're just your passport number. You're just your account number on a bill. That's all you are. You're nothing. You're not seen as anybody really. Pay your fucking bills and shut the fuck up. Keep buying endless shit that you don't need, so that you end up having to sell most of it eventually. That you probably won't be able to sell. Keep trapping yourself in with more and more shit that you don't need, that you'll be getting rid of within a year. And just keep buying into the mass-produced model of endless materialistic bullshit that you don't want. You don't even need it. How many people are online right now buying shit that they don't need, that they'll never probably use, or they'll only use a couple of handful of times, and they'll end up in some cupboard somewhere, or it'll just get old and it'll fade over time, and it's like why? The freedom to clog up landfills, the freedom to destroy the environment, the freedom to destroy our oceans, the freedom to destroy our soil, our air, the freedom to rape whatever's left of our natural resources, oil, coal, earth metals, fresh water supplies. There's your freedom. That's your freedom. See, at the end of the day, the only reason you have a civilized society, if you can call it that, I don't necessarily even think I even really believe in that anymore either, is because we all agree to the social contract in which we basically say we are prepared to give up this and this in exchange for this and this. So it's just a business, isn't it? It's a business exchange. It's a trade-off. You have to follow the rules. You have to pay your taxes. You have to go to work. Or you have to contribute in some way to the system. Or else you will face the consequences for that. You're expected to be part of the collective in terms of what's expected of you. You give up certain freedoms in order to have certain freedoms. We're told that, but we have to, because if you want protection and order and stability and predictability in society, well, then you've got to give up certain things. Well, what about when those things are so severely degraded that you're getting less and less and less, and having to give more and more? Where's your freedom then? Where's the balance then? Because that's essentially what we've been seeing for the past few decades now. There's less and less protection, less order, less fairness, more crime, more terrorism, and for what? What are we getting in return? We're expected to keep paying more and more and more. Cost of living keeps increasing all the time. For what? What are we doing? We're getting less, and we're getting screwed. We're getting screwed left, right, and centre, and everyone can see it. Police don't do fuck all anymore. Councils don't seem to want to do anything anymore, and yet council tax keeps increasing. Yet it takes an hour or so for an ambulance to arrive. The police don't come out and do much anymore. Councils aren't interested in dealing with any new nuisance behaviour anymore. So what are we paying for? You're working your ass off, 2 jobs. With 2 jobs, 3 jobs. Some people might be working all week, or 5-6 days a week. For what? Where's your freedom? And even if you do, and then they can say, well, yeah, but you can have your weekends. Okay, fine. So you work 5 or 6 days a week, so you can have 1 day off or 2 days off, or at best, if you're lucky, you might get 2 weeks off a year. Okay, great. So in your entire career, you'll have a handful of opportunities to have time to yourself. Okay, whoopee-doo, great. Well, yeah, but it's better than not having it. Fine, true. But it's still a condition. It's still a contract. You're only as free as much as you work. As that sign says above Auschwitz, work makes you free. Maybe it's true. You have to pay for freedom. You have to work for freedom. If you can call it freedom, you have to. It's something that you are given or not given. So if somebody has to give you freedoms, are you really free? If someone tells you you're free and keeps telling you you're free, are you really free? If you have to work to have certain freedoms, if you have to have a certain degree of money to have a certain level of freedom, are you really free? How much free will do you really have? Okay, you've got freedom of speech up to a certain point. You can open a business. But again, there are severe restrictions, regulatory bodies involved in which you can only do certain things. And they'll make sure that you can't, and in society, most of the time, most jobs, most careers will only let you earn a certain amount of money. It's all controlled, it's all regulatory, it's all strict, and rules and regulations everywhere you turn. And that's not just by accident, that's by design. And I really mean that. You can go wherever you want as long as you've got money. You can buy whatever you want as long as you've got money. And when you don't have money, or the less money you have, the less things you can do in this life. The less places you can go, the less things you can buy, the less things you can eat, the less things you can wear. So in order to have freedom, you have to not have freedom. If you want to be protected, you have to be controlled. If you want to have rights, you have to give up rights. That's how it works. So it's all a paradox. It's all oxymorons. It's all just irony, isn't it? It really is. It's almost humorous. So my conclusion here is I don't really genuinely believe that there is any real freedom in this life, in this world, without you either having to sacrifice something, give something up completely, or it become a trade-off, like I said. You know, it's a trade, it's a handshake, it's a business deal, it's a signature. It's trade, isn't it? It's a trade. There is no absolute freedom or absolute rights, absolute morality, absolute ethically bound way of living or lifestyle or choices. There are only illusions. You're bound by rules. You're bound by the ways in which other people determine your life for you in many respects. They decide or don't decide how you or you cannot do things. When or when you cannot. Why or why you cannot. Where or where you cannot. How or how you cannot. You didn't design the system, you found yourself in it. Remember that. You're nothing but a participant, you're nothing but a game player. Just as I am. Never forget that. You're just a cog in a machine that you didn't create, that you don't really have any real true sense of, not really any real true, really true meaningful input into. Ever, pretty much. What it really comes down to in the end is this. Everybody's trapped in a cage. It's just that the cage, for some people, is bigger than others. All right? That's all it is, as an analogy. You could say in the West that the cage is bigger, all right? In other places globally, that cage is small, but it's still a cage. You've got more space to move around, but you're still trapped, and you still don't have the key. You can try and get out of it if you can, but good luck. Never forget that. Never, ever, ever forget that you're not really free. If you have to be told, if you have to be convinced or persuaded that you're free, that's how you know you're not. Don't let people try and, con you into this thing of, somehow the West is somehow some kind of, peak of everything. The absolute top of the mountain, the absolute best there will ever truly ever be. Yes, it may be better. All right. I can get behind that, fine. It's better than some places. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be grateful. Of course you should be grateful. Your life could be much worse. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be grateful. I'm not saying that you shouldn't appreciate where you grow up. If you grow up somewhere where you're lucky enough to be able to say these kind of things, where you can say it, even if you can't change things, okay, fine. But never forget just how chained you are to it. Never ever forget that, just how chained you are to that cage. The chain might be longer than other people's chains, so you've got more flexibility. But you can't leave it. You can't leave that system necessarily. And even if you move to another country, you just find yourself in another cage. Maybe it's bigger, maybe it's a little bit smaller, maybe the chain's longer, maybe it's shorter. But essentially, you're still trapped in the system. You can't control it. You can't change it. And if you're lucky, you can have a little bit of input in it. But that's about as far as it goes. And even if you do have freedom at the end of the day, let's just say, just for argument's sake, that we do have freedom. Remember the costs of that freedom. Remember the things that had to happen in order for you to have it, for you to continue to have it. Whether that's the impacts on the environment, whether that's the impacts on other nations, other peoples, debt, the impact on the economy, other people's economies because of it, inflation, scarce resources, damaging vital ecosystems like the Amazon, for example, or parts of the Congo, etc. Never forget just how much damage, just how much impact that what we call freedom, that what we call our autonomy, our rights, our independence is constrained, is so heavily dependent on other people, other places, on other people making choices and decisions on your behalf. You mustn't forget that. They have more leverage, more opportunity, more wealth, more say than you will ever have in your entire life. Never forget that. Because that's what matters. That what matters is that freedom is on a scale. Nobody's truly free, but people have more freedoms than you do. All right, that's the ultimate conclusion I can make, is that there is no real sense of true freedom, as far as I'm concerned. But as a loose thing, as a fluid thing, on a scale or on a spectrum, some people have less than you, some people have more than you. And that's why, yes, you should be grateful for what you do have, I accept that, but also you should be critical and you should analyse and you should be brave enough to accept where you are on that scale and look at that scale and really be honest about what the reality of your life is. Because to me, the truth is what matters in this world. I really believe in the truth, even if it's hard, even if it's uncomfortable and difficult. To me, without truth, there's no point in living. There's no point in life. There's no point to being a human being. There's no point in having a mind and having a brain without truth. That's why science is so important, because without the truth, you can't have anything. You can't learn anything. You can't grow. You can't evolve. You can't have technology. You can't learn about physics, chemistry, biology, space without the truth, without finding out as much as you possibly can. And even just in general, that's what you should be doing in this life. You should be looking for the truth, looking for what's really going on. And even if you can't change anything, at least you can think, at least you can ponder, at least you can be brave, at least you can have the courage to stand out above the masses, even if you can't change anything. Because people can respect you when you're like that. People can respect you being honest and truthful. But you can't be respected if you don't see the chains around you, if you don't see the truth of your world, your inner world, the external world, the world that you've been brought up into. You didn't choose to be born. You didn't choose to be born into the family that you were. You didn't choose to find yourself where you were as a child, as a teenager, even to some extent as a young adult. At a certain point, you certainly have more independence than you do as a youngster. But again, you're still having to play that game. Play the game of culture. Play the game of society. Play the game of normality. People's expectations of you. It's all very fragile. It's all an act. You know, as I said, I think before in other videos, as William Shakespeare said, the world's a stage, the world is a theatre. We are the actors. We are the actors playing. That's all it is. It's just a game. It's a theatrical production in real time that's been playing itself out now for centuries, thousands of years. For as long as there's been civilizations, even really to some extent during the days of tribalism. Pure tribalism, where the alpha was the one that who had the most leverage over everybody else. So it's always been a part of us in some sense or other. It's just that it's become more and more complex over time, that's all. So in the end, you know, the only real power you have in this world is money. That's all you really have, is money. And if you're lucky enough to know certain people that can help you, you know, elevate yourself to a better situation, then you're lucky. But most people don't have that, unless you have something to offer. Whether that's money, knowledge. But even then, you're still confined and bound by restrictions and rules. And people will only let you have a certain level of elevated freedom if it's in their interest for you to do so, for you to have it. You know, that's why politics works, because, you know, it's about knowledge and access to resources, access to money. You know, it's about reputations, it's about respect, it's about a degree of trust, about skills. What do you have to offer? What can you give me? Relationships are no different. Friendships are no different. It's all conditionality. It's all just one contract, one form of a contract or another in this world. Everything you do will always be bound by a contract, whether it's spoken or unspoken. If you have to give something to be free, that begs the question, are you free? It's not something you naturally have. It's something that you're either given or you're not given, I think. In the world that we live in, certainly the modern world. In the end, you know, the more money you have, the more skills you have, the more knowledge you have, the more power you have, the more you can have in this world. The more so-called freedom you can have. But again, it's a business. It's just, I will give you this if you give me this. It's always bound by what other people want from you, what other people expect from you, what other people can get out of you. What can you give people? What can people get from you? The less you have, the less freedom you have, or freedom, so-called freedom. The more you have, the more likely you are to be able to, in some way or other, elevate yourself in some capacity in life. Especially if you've got money, because you can buy yourself out of misery and poverty to some extent. You can buy yourself into, well, it depends on what part of the world you're in, but certainly in the West you can buy yourself out of the confines of your own class system in some capacity. You can buy yourself out of the misery of your dysfunctional neighborhood or community, whatever. So, but again, that depends on how much money you have. And not everybody does have a lot of money. Not everyone has enough money to be able to do that, because things aren't always simple. Things aren't always as black and white as people might like to think, as they try to make them out to be. So freedom is not something that you can gain really through moral or ethical means. It's something that's bound in our world by capitalism, by capital, by assets, by things that you have, not by the person you are. It's about what you have, not what you are. And even if you have more money than other people, you're still bound by rules. You're still bound by other people's decisions. Just because you have the money doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get necessarily what you want, because other people still make decisions on your behalf. No matter how much money, there's always going to be someone that has more than you do. There's always going to be systems that are far more powerful than you do, and head mob mentality kind of, groupthink is always going to, unfortunately, trump a lot of the time the truth. The things, no matter how passionate you are about them, there are always going to be people and groups that will always disagree with you on something and will try to make your life difficult, make it harder for you, delay certain things, reject certain things, ask for more money, unless you've got something on somebody, unless you've got something that can, again, so it's not about freedom, it's about leverage. It's about resources, it's about assets, capital, commodities. That's the only freedom you really have in this world. Because the less you have, the less power you have, the less control you have, the less influence, the less ability to navigate through life you have. All right, that's really the heart of it. So if if people want to talk about absolute freedom, then I don't really think it's a genuine phenomenon. I think, essentially freedom has to be earned or be seen as something that you're deserving of by others. It's not an absolute thing. It's something that you either have to buy or have to earn in some way. And so it's a relative condition. It's all based on circumstances and how much leverage can you have over other people, rather than them having that leverage over you. The more leverage you have over people, the more you can push through things. You can push through the crowd. You can push through the bully boys, the ones that want to dominate in this world. But good luck facing, up to a certain point, because there will always be people that group together that you will have to try to fight against. You can think of the Supreme Court, for example. You can think of major departments of your government that it's very hard to fight against. Even your local council, very hard to fight against. Even the police, the judiciary system's hard to fight against, because they've got more money and resources than you will ever have. And again, that is by design. I don't want to keep repeating myself in this video. I'm going to end it here in a second, but that is just, I'm sorry to burst people's bubbles, but that is the reality that you face. Even if you have money, there's no guarantee that the judge is going to throw your case out. If the police have got something on, so even if you're innocent, the police could still try and pin you on something, or the judge doesn't like you for some reason or other. People can be petty. People can be really vindictive and spiteful and nasty. And I've come across it in my own life. I've seen it happen. Even in communities on YouTube that supposedly a unified group of people there's all sorts of really sort of just shitty behaviours going on and childish mechanisms at play, and just pettiness and point scoring, etc. And that's what humanity is in many ways is really like out there. Sad to say. I wish it wasn't. I wish the world wasn't what it is, but it is. It is what it is. That's what my ex used to say. It is what it is. Carpe diem. Because that's all you can really try and do at the end of the day. That is it. Seize the day. C'est la vie. That's life. That is life. That is our species. We are shit. We're a shitty, horrible, nasty species in many ways. With little glimmers of hope, little flickers of people trying to do something better than they would naturally do. It's all about means. It's not about rights. It's about the means. It's about the means first and the motives after. Without the means, you can't. It doesn't matter what motives you have. So you can have as many choices as you want in life, but without the means to enable you to access those choices or commit to certain things, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many choices you have. It doesn't matter how much consumerism you have. It doesn't matter how much so-called freedom you have. Without the means to be able to express those things, it doesn't matter, does it? You might as well not bother having them. It's all about the limitations that are placed upon you. You have as much freedom as you can only, your limitations dictate how much freedom you have. It's artificial freedom. It's freedom of conditions, conditionality-based freedom. That's what you get in a modern capitalist society. That's just the way it works. That is the world basically in a nutshell. And that's why classism is what it is. That's why it happens. That's why it's still in place. That's why it's still so prevalent. And if you're unfortunate enough to be born into poverty or relative poverty, good fucking luck getting out of it. Good luck. Because you better be exceptionally smart, intelligent, skilled, knowledgeable, or cunning, or you're finished. You're fucked. You might as well just give it up. You might as well just say, essentially, this is my life now. This is what my life will be. And for most people, that is what it is. Because either they're not brave enough, they're not smart enough, they're not intelligent enough, they're not knowledgeable enough. And there are reasons for that, because they don't have the means, they don't have the ability to move up in the world, to empower themselves. And that, again, is all very much, it's meant to be that way. They don't want everybody being empowered. They don't want everyone moving up the social, social class scale, the ladder, whatever you want to call it. They don't want that. They want a certain level of poverty. They need it. We're told, again, especially in America and probably much of the Commonwealth, and certainly in Australia and in the UK, especially the UK with its classist, we were always told about hard work and meritocracy, and that's the key to freedom and everything. But is it really? Just work hard. If you just work hard enough, you won't be unemployed. You'll get that job. You'll be free. Well, yeah, to a point, but again, without the means, without the resources, without the opportunities there, doesn't matter how much hard work. You can, there's no incentive to work hard. There's no incentive to try and get out of it because you can't get out of it unless you've got a certain degree of money, or you save up for years on end. But that requires you to have a certain degree of stability. And when you grow up in a place where there's hardly any economic stability anymore, then that's very difficult. It's very difficult for people to no matter how much they work hard, it doesn't matter. But if you've got access to money or better opportunities that most people have in those areas, then you've got a much better chance in life. People don't want to hear that. People just want to say, you're lazy, you're unmotivated, you're a scrounger, you're a dull dosser, you're a leech on society, a leech on the taxpayer. But it's not about hard work, it's about money. The more money you have, the more opportunities you have. But unless you've got the capabilities to actually earn enough money, to make enough money, to save enough money, especially with the cost of living these days, how can you do it? How without borrowing money and getting yourself into serious debt, how can you genuinely do it? So where's the freedom? Where's the genuine freedom? Where's the fairness? When other people are just lucky enough to be born into wealth, so they're naturally going to go to better schools, better colleges, better universities, and their life probably more likely to be intelligent, more smart, because the parents probably probably went to decent schools, decent universities themselves, and so it becomes an intergenerational thing, and it's very difficult to escape that. And I say that as someone that came from a relative poverty-based kind of upbringing that was very difficult in many ways, and it will be difficult to ever escape from it. Yeah, I'm here in Thailand, but I'm not rich, I'm not wealthy, I haven't got anything in the bank. I came here as a last resort, or pure desperation. Not because I thought it would elevate me in the world or anything, I just thought, well, maybe it might give me some better opportunities. But in the end, it didn't. It didn't really make my life much better in many meaningful ways. So what I'm trying to say here, I'm going to bring this to a close here, but essentially freedom is basically just an aspect of one's circumstances and how beneficial or non-beneficial those circumstances are to someone. Because independence is bound by money. A certain degree of freedom is bound by money. You could even say certain rights to some extent are bound by money. People always say life is what you make it. Well, no, life is what other people set in motion for you in terms of life is like what other people make it, as far as how much you have, how many opportunities you have to navigate yourself through it. The more things that you have at your disposal, the more that you can make of your life. The less that you have, the less you're going to make of your life. Because without enough stable jobs or stable careers, without enough money, without enough connections, without enough opportunities to get out of your current circumstances, it's going to be harder. It's going to be harder for you to make more of your life. Even if you might want to. Even if you are ambitious. Even if you start your own business. There's no guarantees of success. There's no guarantee of anything. And you can say, well, you have to take a gamble. You have to try. True. But again, at the end of the day, if you're already in a bad financial position anyway, you're less likely to be given a loan. So it's going to be harder for you to start a business. It's going to be harder for you to be employed and stay employed if you've been in and out of shitty jobs for the past few years, because your CV is going to be looked upon with serious scrutiny. Why have you been unemployed for so long? Why have you been in and out of different jobs? Even though if it wasn't all technically your own fault. So things are only in existence if they're convenient to other people. It's only convenient for you to have a certain degree of freedom and control and power over your own life if it's convenient to other people. Otherwise, it's not convenient anymore. Accountability and responsibility are only convenient if they're convenient to other people. And if they're not, then they essentially don't exist or lessen, or they become kind of negotiable things. if you want to get a good education, you've got to pay for it. If you want to get that good job, then you're going to probably going to have to make a real serious good impression at that interview, whether it's getting a serious outfit for that interview, whether it's, if you've got the charm, if you've got the talent, or if you've got the intellect, then you're more likely to get it. The less you have, the less chances you have in this world. The less you have, the less opportunities you have. The less access to training, to skills, to education, to experience, to jobs, to money, to connections, to women. That's just the fucking brutal, harsh reality of what it is. You are bound in many respects as to where you come from, to how you've developed through where you've come from, and not necessarily always about your effort. It's not always about working hard. It's about being cunning and conniving and sometimes scamming people, sometimes using people. And if you don't want to live like that, then good luck. If you don't want to become that kind of person, then good luck. Because that's essentially how it all works. The more immoral you are, the more likely you are to be successful. The more unethical you are, the more likely you are to be successful in this world. To have more money, to keep more money. So it's as much as, to some extent it is hard work, but it's also about systemic problems. It's your psychological state, the economy, personal matters, whether it's your health, whether it's your mental health, and whether you're lucky enough to have certain traits that are beneficial for you to progress in life or not. Because if you don't, that it's going to be much, much harder for you than other people. And these things get overlooked. These things get, cast to the side as if they don't matter, but they do matter. It's not about whether you try hard enough you'll succeed. It's nothing to do with that. It's about how can you navigate yourself in a position where you are seen as a better competitor than other people. That's all it comes down to, because that's all it is. That's all it really is in the end. It's nothing but competition. The further up the scale you go, the more alpha you're deemed to be, and so the more likely you are to get away with more things because you've got more resources, you've got more means to do it. The less you have, the more restrictions you have on your life, the more limitations you have, the less freedom you have. Do not buy into all of this. Your life is your own fault. All you have to do is work hard. All this kind of bullshit. Because it's not. That's only. Yes, there is some truth to it, but it's only part of the picture. You can work hard as much as you want. How many people getting up every day and working their asses off in shit jobs and careers and will never be able to navigate themselves out of it? Even in the West. It's about working hard. It's about in the end, it's either about being smart and cunning and screwing people over, taking advantage, exploiting other people, or it's somehow you have to be smart enough to somehow, some way get out of it. Meritocracy is great if you have the means in which you can propel yourself forward through education and training skills. But again, there's still a lot of conditions, there are still a lot of things that can hold you back, even if you have those things. It's not just about you being smart, it's about how other people perceive you and how other people think you are or you are not deserving of certain opportunities or not. You could try your best to go to another interview. You think you've done well, you was polite, you was respectful, but you didn't get it. Even if you've got the right skills, so it's not just about education. It's often about nepotism, favoritism, discrimination of one kind or another. So people are full of shit. Life's full of shit. Humanity's full of shit. We live lives of endless deception from the cradle to the grave. All right? That is the absolute bottom line of it. The better your starting point in life, the more likely you are to be successful. All right? That is just the absolute crux of the matter for the most part. Yes, there are always exceptional people that break through, and you always hear these like success stories, but how common are they? How common are they really? Very, very few. And often it's because they've been lucky enough somewhere along the line, they met the right person, they got involved with something at the right time, the right place, and they were successful because of it. But often because of other people as well. But they'll not tell you that. They'll just say, yeah, well, if I can make it, if I can break out of this working class shithole, then you can too. So it's just not always as simple as people try and make it out, is all I'm saying, all right? Things aren't always what you think they are. That's all really my point in this video. Just think things through carefully, try and think a little bit more analytical and deeper about things. And either you'll come to the same conclusion as me, or you'll disagree with me, or you'll find yourself in a place where you just don't know what to think. And sometimes that's where I am. I don't know what to think anymore. I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know what's really what is or what isn't anymore. You see, I know I keep saying I'm going to go, but this is literally the last thing I'm going to say, because I know it's been a long video. But it required a long video, this topic, I think. I think it was worthwhile it being a long video. And that is, when you hear these kind of like typical kind of like remarks, these petty insults from people saying, oh, if you only work hard, if you only do this, if you only do that, then, you'll be as successful as me. It's like, as successful as I am. Those are the last people you should be taking advice from. Those are the last people that you want to be hearing, unsolicited advice from or judgments from. I work hard, therefore something, I do this, therefore something. It's just always this like, this like claiming of some moral high ground with people. I have a job, so therefore you don't have the right to say this. I work hard, so therefore you don't have the right to complain because you don't work hard, or you don't have a job, or you don't work as hard as I am. There's always this like constant hierarchy of like moral, just this moral outrage all the time. This constant classism or class within class bullshit that you can get going on, especially in England. I just get sick of it, especially all of this like performative moral outrage from the middle classes towards the working class or the underclass, the working poor, whatever I'm calling. How dare you complain? How dare you be lazy, or what's considered to be unmotivated and lazy, or this or this? When I'm doing this, when I get up off my backside and do this, blah. So it's all about people preaching from the comfort of their nice little cozy warm studios, But life is complicated. Life is a complex mixture of things, of varying opportunities, access to money, access to the right people, circumstances, various types of resources of one kind or another. It just, all it really is just this thing of, they probably deep down resent the fact that other people, they think that other people have got more rights and freedoms than they have, and so they're bitter about it because they're paying into it, even though the things that they're paying into are actually still are there actually for themselves as well. So that people just like to position themselves in positions of moral authority, in positions of a moral sort of hierarchy system in which they like to think that they're somehow superior to everybody else because of this or this or this. And at the end of the day, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have some degree of accountability and try your best in life as much as you possibly can, given your limitations, of course. But again, sometimes you need support. Sometimes you need help. Sometimes you need things that you just don't have. That's the truth of it. And these people that like to complain from their nice little positions, their high horses of morality, these are people that are often they're a part of the problem. They have this one-size-fits-all mentality. They don't realise that one's early life or their childhood, their teenage years, the conditions of those times often dictate how people can either develop or don't develop, or develop slowly more compared to other people. And don't forget, some of these people come from much better areas of the country, from parents that have either got established careers or well-established jobs, might be more intelligent in some ways, have come from affluence in some form or another, and probably have had much better opportunities, have had better chances in life early on. And that matters. That really, really matters. Life is not this it's not the same for everybody. Look around you. Take a look around you. Some people have better cars than other people. Some have better houses. Some people have better jobs than other people. And you can say, well, life's not fair. Okay, fine. Life isn't fair. And you know why it's fair? It's because of people like that. Because people like to put people down. People like to ruin what's left of people's self-esteem, just so they can feel better about their own miserable jobs or careers, their own life circumstances that they don't really like, they don't want. But it's better than, but at least they can say, well, at least I'm better than those people. You might not like me, but at least I'm not unemployed. At least I'm not this and not that. That's the mentality. That's the shoving people into their place, trying to put people down. Trying to put people in shove people into that typical kind of classism mentality bullshit. It's not about just how much you work. It's about opportunity. It's about circumstances. It's about luck sometimes as well. So I just get tired of all of this criticism and judgment from people that are hardly fucking some kind of fucking morally superior role models or anything themselves, So I'm not gonna listen to people like that talking shit about other people that are in much worse conditions and situations than that. Even if some of it is self-inflicted. Again, there are still many reasons behind that. And they should thank themselves lucky that they will never ever have to live in those circumstances. This outrage of morality, of ethics, and doing the right thing for everybody else. It's well, it's all right for you to say that in your little cozy little tower. But if the tables were turned, it'd be very different. Because all it really is just bitterness, it's just resentment, it's nothing but pure classism. It's nothing but pure discrimination. Scapegoat the most vulnerable in society that have got the least. They've got nothing anywhere. They do anything, most of those people, to end up in your positions that they'll never ever get to be in, never have the opportunities to be in, because they have the wrong accent, or they came from the wrong place, or they don't dress a certain way, they don't sound a certain way, they don't look a certain way. So all of this bullshit about you're free to be successful, this is fuck. It's a load of bollocks. Absolute load of bollocks. All it is this morally superior posturing shit, all right? And I'm just really tired of it. I'm tired of this twisted morality. I'm tired of this sickening, disgusting way in which these people in already comfortable, nice positions of some kind of authority, whether it's in the media or politicians, get to try and shit all over everybody else. I get fucking sick of it. It's because of fuckers like you that those towns and cities have been fucking hollowed out. That's why there's nothing left of them, because of you fuckers like you. How dare you fucking sit there and complain about people being unemployed, not working enough, when you people like you or your fucking nice people, your friends or your family are responsible, or directly or indirectly, for the exact same things you're complaining about. How dare you? How dare you sit there and criticise and judge people when you're earning 3 times, 4 times as much money as they are? How dare you? Who the fuck are you? And with that, I will catch you on another video soon. Sorry for the ranting there, but thank you for listening. I'm sorry it was a long one. See you soon.